I am so excited and honored to be here speaking about native navigation for every platform. My name is Eric Vicenti. I'm super passionate about empowering developers to build great apps. This is what I've been super excited about. And I've been lucky to be working at Facebook on React Native apps since 2014, helping developers build apps like Ads Manager, some features within the Facebook app, and the Groups app, which are some of the earliest React Native apps. And I've been working on sharing code, not just between different platforms, but between these different apps. So I'd like to share with you some of the insights that we've had and some of the difficulties that we've faced as we've tried to share code between these different platforms and different apps. So if we take a look at an example, it's not a very specific example, but we might have two areas of the application where you can't see their different colors very well, but there are two areas of the application that each have their own stack of cards, right? So they could be different tabs in an iOS app, for example, where you tap on something and you will go through several cards, and then you can tap into a different card and you'll see a different navigator. Now, the problem is we used to take an approach where we would use stateful navigators. So each tab would maintain its own state of all the different cards, right? Now, this is like not perfectly ideal, and for one really clear reason is, as actions come into the application, we need to handle them imperatively. So it can be pretty tedious to do that, as we have to handle a URI for a deep link, or as we handle a back press on Android. But the real problem comes when we need to link from one area of the application to the other, because this breaks our isolation of our code. So all of a sudden, one area of the application needs to know about the rest. This is really problematic. So we're going to try and take a different approach where our navigation views are fully declarative. It's going to be much nicer. We can actually see what's going on because we're always telling our navigation views exactly what to present. And we can use a reducer to define our state. Imagine that. So what we can do is we can keep our state outside of the application, but it can model the same shape as the application. So as you can see, we have two different reducers that are going to define the state for each area of the application, and then we're going to combine them in one reducer that's going to output the application state. So as we get actions, be them from URIs or back actions, we ask the reducer to give us the new application state. And as we get actions from the application, like tapping a link or something, we're going to use the reducer to get the new application state. Then we're just going to flow the state down into the application in a pretty straightforward fashion. So I don't want to bore you by talking all day about this library. Let's actually show you something. But I want to make sure it's relevant to everyone here in the audience. So I want to do a quick poll just to see how many people, like how much duplicate effort we've all wasted together just in this room. So raise your hand if you've happened to build like a billing flow or a checkout flow, something to get users through a billing process with several screens. Okay, we have a handful of people, a lot of people who have built a billing flow. Okay, how about building a chat application, like with messaging, commenting, chatting? Who's had to build an interface like that? Okay, so I see like about half of the audiences raise their hands. So this is quite a bunch of people. Now, of those people who just raise your hand again if you were able to like drop something in that was kind of mostly already built, and you could just put it inside of your application without too much effort or modification. Nobody. Oh wait, no, there's a hand in the back. So it's not super easy to take a big section of your application and share it with each other, or download it off of NPM and just drop it inside of your application. So let's take a look at a way that we might be able to do that. Okay. So here we've got a very simple application, a chat application, and we're running it in iOS and Android. Hopefully you can see it. Let's take a look at the code. All right, so our chat application is a React component. When we render it, we're actually going to grab something from the state coming in off of props. So you can tell this isn't the top level of our application. In this case, we're going to decide what to render based on something in the route map. So we'll go into the route map for a second, but first let's see what the top level of the application actually looks like. All right, so the top level of the application, we're going to simply render a chat app. The chat app is what we were just looking at. We're going to pass in the state. This is kind of like a poor man's Redux. This is not actually Redux, but it works in the same way, where we're keeping all of the state outside of the application. It's all, the state for the whole application is inside of state.appstate. Now, when we want to handle an action, by the way, we give a dispatch handler to the chat app. We want to handle an action, we're going to pass it through the reducer. And the reducer is defined by the chat app. And then if they've changed the state, we're going to set state. And we're going to use async storage so that as the state changes, we're going to be able to persist it over refreshes. And if they kill the app, we'll be able to come back to the exact same place. So let's take a look at how this works. The chat app actually defers almost everything to the route map, which is where we define the reducer, as well as where we define how to render things. And the route map here is defined, we use this utility to go from the route map to like the reducer and the renderer. Let's take a look at the route map. So this is how we're going to define the way we handle a chat action. So the action is called chat. This is how we're going to render it. And we're also going to need a title for later on. So it's pretty straightforward. It has access to the dispatcher here. So when we tap the chat list from inside of the chat, we're just going to dispatch a chat action, or a chat list action. And let's take a look at the way we render chat list. OK, we're just going to render a chat list. And when they select a chat by name, we're going to fire an action for the chat. OK, so the utility is actually going to take care of the reducer for us. Let's take a look at how this works. OK, so you can tap into something, and you can tap in further to see the chat list. So we've pushed twice. We've got 3 items in our stack. And let me refresh to just demonstrate that we're actually in exactly the same place. It'd be better if I was here. OK. Let's make sure this works on Android as well. OK, well, it does. Unfortunately, Genymotion has this. Here we go. All right. The other thing that we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to handle deep links. So you can see we're using this linking API to pull off the initial URL. And we're going to ask the chat app to get us an action from this URL. We're going to action with location. And we're going to pass in the params and path. So let's take a look at action with location to see how this works. OK, so when we get a URL like this, we're just going to return a chat action if it matches. Pretty straightforward. Let's try this on iOS. Wait. Oh. OK, so we've deep linked into our app. This is nice. Now, what else can we do? The app container is also going to fire a special action for us for back press. So let's look at our back Android handler. See, we're just going to handle action, a back action. Pretty straightforward. So let's make sure this works on Android. OK, back action, looking good. All right, now this is OK, but we actually want to try using the new navigation library so that we can take advantage of all these cool animations and transitions. So let's switch over our chat app to use the new library. We're going to uncomment this new render function. That's going to show us that we're rendering a transitioner. And this is going to manage the transition between states. So it's going to keep previous scenes on the screen for long enough for them to animate out. And it will also help with gestures and things like that. So we're going to give it the navigation state, which is telling it what are our current routes and which index along those routes do we have selected. Next, we have a renderer, where we're actually going to defer the rendering of each scene to this render scene function. So we're going to get in some scenes, which are going to include the things that we're animating away from, and we're going to call render scene. Now, render scene is going to return a navigation card, which is like a stock component that handles its own gestures and animations. So you can write your own navigation card, but in this case, we're just going to use this stock one. And you can see that we're just going to basically tell it how to render the insides. We're also going to tell it what to do when they swipe back, which is just a fire back action. So when we're rendering the scene, we're just going to look at our route map to define what are we going to render. We're going to render that scene. OK, let me comment out the other render function. And we'll see if this works for us. OK, we should be able to swipe back. Cool. So this is just navigation card. You can customize it or fork it. We don't actually use that at Facebook, but you can do with it what you'd like. Also, we've got the same thing going on Android. Oops. So we haven't customized the animations on Android, but we could very well do that. We could also drop in a different component if we decided not to use the transitioner. And let's try it with a back button animation. OK, cool. So that was fun, right? OK. Oh, we got to the start. So let's take a look at the structure of what we were just doing. We've embedded our chat application into both iOS and Android. We're just running it on either platform here. But it actually seems like a pretty portable application, so I'm curious how easy it would be to drop it into some other application. Let's try dropping it into a more realistic application. I don't want to shortchange you on the demos here, so let's look at an application that's actually in production today. It's in the Apple Store and the Play Store, and it was built by Alex Kodolarski in a little over a month. It's Facebook's F8 conference app, and it's open source. It uses a lot of best practices like Redux, so it's a really great example application for us to look at. So let's try embedding the chat application into the F8 app and see what we can get. OK, so first we're going to need an action inside of the F8 app that's going to give us, allow us to handle actions for the chat app. So we're actually going to create a wrapper action where we're going to take a chat action and pass it into this F8 action. All right. Next, we're going to need to actually dispatch the action at some point. So we're going to take a look at this chat. This is just part of a normal Redux connect call with our actions. So we're going to dispatch a chat action, and we're going to pass in a chat app action, according to the name. There we are. So there we go. We should be handling or requesting the action now. Oh, you know what? I think, OK, yeah, we actually need to fire the action when we press the button as well, of course. All right. Now we're going to configure our F8 action route map. So this is where it gets a little bit interesting. So for this particular type, we're going to be rendering a chat app. And we're going to pass in a state, as is currently defined by our reducer. And we're going to give it access to a dispatcher, but when it dispatches, we're going to wrap the actions with a chat action so that we know that it's going to be handled by the chat app itself. Because the chat app does not have the ability to link outside of itself, based on the way we've set it up. And we've also defined a reducer. So this is how we're going to define the state for this route. And we're just going to defer to the chat app reducer. So we're going to embed this whole chat app with all of its actions and logic. It could be a perfectly polished chat app. In this case, it's horribly broken and simple. But we've got, we can fully embed it. So once we do, work out all of those bugs, then we'll have a really nice embedded case here. So I hope this is going to work for us. Let's switch over to F8. I'm going to need to actually change servers for the React development server. And it's not happy. OK, so this is the F8 app. Let me see if I can't quite scale it properly, but let's see if I can tap into this discussion button that we've modified. All right, we've got the chat app in here. So here we go. And look, the full chat app is working. OK, now let's go check it out on Android, make sure it works there as well. Give it a nice refresh. OK, here we go. Now, the cool part is that because our reducer is, the way that our reducer is set up, our outside reducer is going to first ask the chat app to handle a particular action. So when we press back, we're not going to back out of the whole chat app, even though it is just one view. We're going to ask the chat app itself to handle the back action. So we're going to go back within the chat app. But we can still, the back button still continues to work for the rest of the app. Cool. So that's the F8 demo. All right. Let's take a look at what we just did. So we've taken the chat app and we've embedded it inside of F8. Now, the cool thing about the F8 app is it actually runs on Windows as well. And there are more platforms that are coming to React Native. So we've got a really exciting ecosystem where there are like all sorts of applications, or all sorts of platforms where we can run our applications. And if you think about it, the F8 app is kind of another platform that you can run the chat app on, because the chat app itself runs on Android and iOS, and also potentially Windows. The other really cool thing is that if you think about it, you could even take the chat app and embed it inside of native applications, and you could come up with a native wrapper if you want to do the extra legwork, so that not only can you embed it inside of React applications, but you can embed it inside of native applications. And you can ship your chat app as an independent native library for iOS or Android. OK, so we've seen all sorts of different ways we can take our chat component and put it inside of some other platform or other application. But let's take a look at how a different way we can embed our chat application. Let's take a look at an articles example where we're actually going to use a shared reducer, and we're going to keep a very flat navigation state. And I'll show you why this is cool. So we're going to take an articles example where it's basically just an app where there are different articles going on. We'll be able to browse the different articles. OK, so actually, earlier you saw the app container was actually quite generic. It didn't really have anything specific about chat app in it. So we're going to reuse that same app container. We're just going to replace all instances of chat app with articles app. OK. All right, let's get out of F8, switch the servers back. All right, this is our articles app. And OK, isn't React fun? Oops. OK, so without too much trouble, we're able to drop in our component. And at a very flat level, we're going to be able to embed our chat application. You'll notice that our chat application, or rather our articles application, defers several things to the chat application. So when we try and get the title, for example, we're going to defer parts of this to the chat application. For example, when we're trying to open a URL, we're going to defer to the oops. So here we're going to try and find the action for a particular location. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to see if we're going to match our default action. Otherwise, we're going to go and defer to this particular post. So we can deep link into our posts. And ideally, we would actually defer here into our chat application to see what its action might be. All right, but let's take a look here. We've actually embedded the full chat action route map into here, which is how we're able to have a very flat hierarchy and still link into our application. And you can see that, of course, things like the back button are going to continue to work. Let's give this a go. OK, so without too much difficulty, we can run the articles here. Now, the interesting thing here is you can see our application is exposing a title. And it's also exposing a way to go back and a way to open a URL. So you can see we've already implemented most of the navigation necessary for going onto web. This is the most exciting part. We should be able to just run this application on the web, right? Do you guys want to do that? All right. Actually, we can't quite do that yet because it's not that hard. I promise. Look, all we need to do is we need to expose other features that are available in a browser. So in the browser, right, we display the title of the current spot. But you can see we already exposed the title. We have getTitle defined on our articles app, right? But what we haven't quite exposed yet is we need to actually enable the URL. Because in the browser, we always need to show the most up-to-date URL. So we need to be able to go from the current application state to the URL so that we can give them an up-to-date URL that they might want to copy. The Articles app works in largely the same way as the chat app, but you can see that it also renders a header, which is another one of those pre-built components. So the header button, this is how we have the link into the comment area. But look, we're going to be able to convert location to the route. And our action map is actually going to handle that for us. So here we're going to go. We're going to be able to look at the route, at the current route, which is the topmost scene, or whichever scene the container is asking about. And we should be able to expose it. Let's see how well this works. Let me give it a refresh, which is the scariest part, let me tell you. OK, comment. OK, so you can see it's not quite perfect, but we've got a pretty exciting situation. For example, the transform animation doesn't work super well. There's still a couple of rough corners. But this is using React Native Web, so we're using the exact same code on all platforms. Also, touch handling will get messed up. The good news is the URLs are going to stay in sync. So as you tap into something, both the title and the URL bar update. What else is cool is we will render this on the server. So you can see we've got server rendering because everything that we need to render our code is all available there. OK. So that's most of what we have going on. What we have isn't perfect. I'm going to open source all of this example code that we've seen today. And I'm pretty excited to share it with you. Let's talk a little bit about the future of navigation experimental. Now that you've seen the way we can embed our chat app and our articles app all on the web platform. So navigation experimental is a library that we released earlier this year to improve the state of navigation and to keep our navigation more stateless. The greatest part about it, I think, is that we've been able to decouple the gestures from the navigator. So we are in a much more clean state where we can innovate freely on our gestures and on our animations without touching the container. The container is the part that's stabilizing. It's navigation animated view, but we're merging that with navigation view into navigation transitioner, which is the last planned API change that we have for navigation experimental. We're already using navigation animated view in production at Facebook, so we're really excited that we're starting to enter a stabilization period. And pretty soon we're going to be updating the documentation to keep everything up to date and to reflect that. So I'm really excited about the future of navigation experimental. It's been going really well. There are some features that we've decided to kill because they were confusing to people and had sort of clunky APIs, such as the reducers as well as the containers, which had overlap with Flux and Redux. So this is what I'm excited about. Like I said at the beginning, I'm super excited about empowering developers to build great apps. And building great apps is a lot of work. When a feature like chat, when you try to build this for several different platforms, it'll take a long time. It'll take several weeks at best, and that can be really painful. I want to live in a world where I can just npm install a chat app and plop it into my application for every platform. Now, I know you're wondering, like, who's actually going to go and build this chat app for me? Like, that sounds ridiculous. But there are actually like companies that are incentivized to build these things. There are companies like Discourse and Olark that focus on building chat applications for your applications. They would attract developers by building a universal React application that can be put in on any platform really trivially. So I want to live in a world where the next time I need to go and build a checkout flow or a billing feature, I won't have to build it all myself. I'll just be able to install something from Braintree or Stripe, depending on which is better. So I'm really excited for this world. We're entering this golden age of shared code with React. Not only can we share code between several different platforms, web, iOS, Android, Windows, and even more platforms are coming up. We can share small components and big components. We can share whole applications and everything in between. We're sharing this code between ourselves and inside of our companies, inside of our community, so that we can move faster than ever before. And I've never been more blown away by this, like, in comparison to other communities. This community has just blown me away in the quality of the open source contributions. The components, the libraries, the dev tools, they're all spectacular. So I really can't wait to see how you all join me in ushering in this new era of shared code with React. Thank you so much.